Alright, YouTube. Looks like we're going to make another video about weed eaters. We have the 18 volt, which is the other video that's on there about how to change the line. Well, we got one of these 40 volt ryobe weed eaters, weed whackers, whatever you want to call them. So on this one, I'm going to show you how to change the line on this, and of course this is going to be kind of like the gas ones because it uses the expanded feature. So let's get into it. So the first thing you want to do is take the battery out. You don't want to have the battery in there for any reason if you accidentally hit it or something. I find it easier to just take the attachment off. So we're going to come over here and unscrew the expanded attachment to take it off of the motor unit. You unscrew this, of course. If you haven't used these before, I may do a video on that, but press the little button in and just completely take the attachment apart. Put the motor piece down somewhere where it won't fall in the bus. And then we go to this. So some of the things to know, like pretty much any of the weed eater heads like this, typically the bolts on these is not the normal lefty-loosey, righty-tighty type of pattern. You actually have to turn it the opposite direction. So if you look on the head, you'll see the direction it shows to take it off. Here it shows off and it has an arrow this way, so you would just, grab that red button. It shouldn't be on there too tight. I mean, it could be, but you don't need to really tighten it on too much to put it back in. So anyways, you just unscrew that off, as you can see, and it should come off pretty easy. If you're really having to manhandle this thing or use pliers, then it was put on too tight, and try not to do that again. It should be hand tight, that's about it. So what that's going to do is that's going to make this piece come up. We actually thought it was out of line, but actually it's got some line on it. This happens actually quite often where there's still line left on it. But I'm going to go ahead and take this line off. Alright, so the key on these right here is that you don't have to have two separate pieces of line. You just have to have one piece of line. Most likely what you would do is you would just get a bias spool of line that you need to cut, pull you off a good section. I don't know, I'd put my arms out and measure a section like that, but in general this is kind of small. This is just going to be wasted. I wouldn't put this back on. We actually had this piece of line that came with the weed eater when we first bought it that we just never used. We used it out of the package that we bought, but in this video I'm just going to use it since it was already pre-cut. As you can see, it's quite larger than a full arm span, but you don't want to cut too much off because it'll get too thick on the spool. But anyways, back to the point on how to do it. So if you look on the spool, here's the spool. You can see it's got this weed eater, unlike the 18 volt electric ones, actually has two sections where the line will come out. What you want to do is you want to have your piece of line cut. There's a hole here in the middle, and you actually just stick it right through the entire spool. So as you can see, it's coming out the other side as I push it. So you should have just one piece of twine that you run through, and I just pull it through until I get these even. You can just grab both ends and try to pull it through to make it level. Right, so now each section of the spool will have about the same amount. So another thing you want to look at is there's going to be these grooves here. As you can see, you don't want to try to reel it this way. That's just going to get caught in the head. You want to actually put it in the grooves like it's showing. So if it's got the groove going this direction, that's the direction you want to spool it in. And as you see, the groove goes down. So that means this direction goes for the bottom spool. So you just put it on there, put it tight, not super tight like you're stretching it, but just kind of tightly wind it around until you've pretty much run out of line. When you get to the edge and you're running out of line, that's what these little notches here are for, is to just hold it temporarily. They don't do a great job, but they do hold it temporarily until you can spool the other side. So now, as you see here, there's a notch just like the other side. but it goes up, so this is for the top spool. So you spool it in the direction of the notch. You just keep, again, spooling it until you start running out of line. It's helpful to put this in the notch that is opposite of the other notch that you put in, and I'll show you why as we're putting it back together. So as you can see, it's run through the notches on both sides, and it's wrapped around based upon which direction the notch is going. Of course, so here's the bottom, right? You can see this is the side that's getting torn up. So when you put it on, this notch, the little notch heads go in first. So the key here is when you're getting ready to put it in, if you've left a couple inches sticking off each side, you can route these pieces of twine off into each hole. And as you can see, these little notches don't hold that great. So as I'm putting it in there, they practically give way as soon as I put it in there. So you want to, you know, kind of, you've got to put the whole, you know, this, I guess, the spindle on top of this bolt that's sticking out. So that goes down the middle, and then you just slide it in. If this line doesn't come off the notch, then as you pull it in, just kind of pull the line on each side to get it to come out.
Does it have to come off the notch?
Yeah, if it stays on the notch as you're putting it in and it doesn't come out, once you get it in further, you probably can still pull it off the notch. But as this goes in deeper, if those line is still stuck on that notch, you may not be able to pull the line hard enough to get it off the notch because it's binded in there. So once this head goes in, there's not a whole lot of room in here. There's a spring down there that allows you, you know, to do this, which I'll give a little bit more information on why that's there. But you pretty much have to have them off the notches before you push this thing down and put this red bolt on.
Okay.
So as you can see, these are poking through on each side. You know, the line is still nice and spooled tight in there. So then you push, you have to hold one hand, you have to push this spool down, and then you have to get this bolt. And again, remember, it's opposite of what it would normally be. So if you're gonna, it shows on here, you take it off this direction, then of course it means to put it on, you have to go the opposite direction. So here we're turning it left to get it to go on. And just watch how tight I make it. I just literally just roll my finger enough to make it tight. I don't really try to screw it down tight or anything like that. The reason it's threaded backwards is because when this machine is running this weed eater and this head is turning, it's turning the other direction. So it's not going to loosen up, it's just going to tighten as you're running it. So you don't have to have this thing, you know, locked down real tight, because if you do, I'm telling you, it's going to be a pain to get this off. So that's about all you need. Now, one of the reasons there's a spring in there, it's definitely quite different than the 18 volt because this is what they call a bump feed. The 18 volt one had a electric feed where, or not electric feed, but a manual feed, but it worked based upon when you turned it on and off, there was a spring in there that would automatically feed it out. Well, this one's different. You have to actually bump it to make this line come out. And what that means is when you're running, you can't bump it while it's not moving. There's no force to get the line out. You actually have to have it on the unit and you have to be weed eating. And when your line gets low, like this would be low line, you don't want to have really much less than this sticking out, or you're not going to have enough force, centrifugal force, to pull this line out when it's spinning. So don't run it all the way down to nothing and then expect it to come out. It's not going to come out. So you need to leave the line, and of course that's what these little cutters are for here. The line really shouldn't get any longer than this. If it does, you're just wasting it, because when it spins, this is just going to chop it off. So the line should always be about this long. As it eats out, bump it once or twice to feed a little bit more, and that's the whole concept of the bump feed. Anyway, so this is put back together. Again, bump feed, just that's what the spring is for. When you push this down, it's telling that spindle down there to allow this head to move. And now if you look, now the line's even a little bit longer because I manually bumped it. But anyway, so that's how you do that. Putting it back together is going to be the same way of pulling it apart. I'm assuming if you got to the point of putting new line on there, then you probably know most of what I talked about the bump feeding, because it's kind of hard to bump feed without, you know, using line. But anyway, so one thing on these, if you've never messed with these, is it's expanded from Ryobi. There's multiple holes here because the different attachments go on at different angles. This one is the weed eater attachment, essentially goes to the left. Unless you're trying to do edging with it, then you might turn it to another side to get a different cut angle. But essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure, here's a key with all the expanded things. This is a tip that you might find yourself in. If this expanded wire is sticking out too far, I mean, this is not too bad here, but sometimes on these expanded items, you'll look at it and this wire will be sticking out 2 to 3 inches. That just means that the actual cable that's in here to run the attachment has come loose from whatever head it has. So if you have something that's really sticking out far and you're trying to get it on this, it's not going to go on. And if you do manage to jam it on, the head might not work on whatever it is. We have that problem with the blower attachment that we have. But as long as you look at this and you make sure that that cable that's in here is pretty much flush with the outside of this, then you should be fine and it should go on with no problem. This you would just push in or force it in, whatever. I try not to force too much, but anyways, the silver button needs to be lined up, and once it's lined up the way you want, of course, use this to tension down the attachment so it doesn't rattle around, and that little silver button is not going to hold that whole attachment while you're beating it. Of course, and then when you're done, you just get the battery, put it back on these 40 volts. They snap in, but they don't seem to always snap in well, so just, you know, make sure you hear the click and that it's snapped in, and then you're ready to go. Think you can do that?
I'm going to have to go back to the video.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Watch it as many times as you need, guys.